Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Denise, and I wanted to welcome you, and I'm so glad I get the honor of welcoming you to today's first ever EvalFest webinar, which is focused on how to find an evaluator. Just so everyone's clear, EvalFest is a research project funded by the National Science Foundation. Our goal is to better understand science festivals and their impact through creating a robust suite of evaluation tools that increase evaluation use among science festivals. This is a 5-year project that's just started officially on September 1st, and we're so glad that you're going to be involved with us. Okay, and then we just thought it was important to take a moment to celebrate and say congratulations and woohoo that we finally got funded. As many of you know, this was the 3rd round of submissions of this project proposal to the National Science Foundation, and we really appreciate all of you, and particularly those who've been with us through all 3 cycles of grant review. It's been quite a wild ride, and we're thrilled to actually get to start this work and very excited to get going. At this point, we thought we would just very briefly, there are 3 of us presenting today, and we thought we would each briefly introduce ourselves. My name is Denise Young. I work at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill at a science center on this campus called Moorhead Planetarium and Science Center. I'm also the co-founder of the North Carolina Science Festival. The North Carolina Science Festival is entering its 5th year, so we'll have our 5th festival in 2015. And I'm thrilled again to be involved in this project. Evaluation is near and dear to my heart, and it's been critical to growing and making our festival a success. And I'm really excited that Karen Peterman is in the room here with me, which is why you maybe don't see her name on the board here, but she is here. And Karen, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Karen Peterman. I own a small research and evaluation firm based in Durham, North Carolina, called Karen Peterman Consulting, and specialize in the evaluation and research of STEM programs. I was lucky enough to have the chance to evaluate my first festival in 2009. I helped evaluate the San Diego Science Festival, and then got to be part of the first Science Festival Alliance grant as well. And then since 2012 have been the evaluator for the North Carolina Science Festival. And just want to echo the big yay that Denise gave for finally being successful and getting this grant and being able to start working with all of you guys. Catherine, you want to take over for a second?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Catherine Nielsen. I'm at the University of California, San Francisco. I'm co-director of the Science and Health Education Partnership here at UC San Francisco, and also co-founder of the Bay Area Science Festival. As I think many of you know, we are launching our 4th festival later this month, October 23rd through November 1st. So if anyone wants to come out to San Francisco and the Bay Area, we would love to see you. When I'm not working on the Science Festival, we have a range of programs in San Francisco public schools that bring scientist volunteers from the university to partner with teachers and their students, kindergarten through 12th grade.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Just to remind everyone, the goals for this specific webinar are to provide some helpful tips for assisting festivals in identifying an evaluator for your festival. Having an evaluator identified is an integral part and a requirement for participation in EvalFest. Over this next hour, we'll learn more about you as well, and we'll share our ideas and experiences with identifying evaluators, and then share tips on creating successful relationships with an evaluator. And then just a little bit about the logistics and how this webinar will work. Today there are the three presenters. We've just introduced ourselves. This is an audio webinar with slides. But as you'll learn, we encourage participation and have built opportunities in to this webinar today. And at the moment, your audio is turned off. But if you have a question or want to make a comment, please use the raise hand icon. You can find it on the left-hand side of your screen. Just raise your hand, and we'll, as soon as we can, open your microphone so you can speak. Or if we can't get that to work, or you prefer to just type in your question into the chat box, which is towards the bottom of your screen, we'll get to that as soon as we can. We kind of got a lot of eyes looking to make sure we can get your questions. We do have time built in at the end devoted to questions and answer as well, but we're going to take questions and answers as we go. Also, please know that we're recording these webinars for future reference, and at the conclusion of today's webinar, you will get an email with a link to the recording, so you'll have it forever, and we'll also be able to send it out to others who might not have been able to attend. So with that, I think we're really going to get going now.
Okay, this is Catherine again, and I have the honor of welcoming the many science festivals that are a part of this new award. There are 26 science festivals in total. You can see here that they are all across the country. What's maybe not so clear is how the range of models of science festivals. We have festivals that are 1 day to those that are 1 to 2 months. We have festivals that are in a city or at a university or in a region, and then we have statewide festivals. So a lot of different models, and we're really excited about bringing this group together and learning from each other. And what we'd like you to actually do now is just to type your name in the chat box and the festival that you are affiliated with, so that everyone who's here can just get a sense of which festivals are here. Thank you, Sung, for doing that. And I think we're ready. If everyone can keep doing that, we can move on to the next slide while you type in where you're from.
All right, hey everybody, this is Karen again, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the broad method that we're going to use for hopefully implementing this entire project, and that is through the lens of a multi-site evaluation. What is special about our multi-site evaluation is that it is going to be community created. Multi-site evaluations, in case it's a new term for you, involve multiple program sites, and so in our case it's multiple festivals that participate in cross-site evaluation activities. What has typically happened with multi-site evaluation in the past is that it is imposed on participants instead of something that they create on their own. And so one of the unique aspects of EvalFest is that we will create our multi-site evaluation ourselves and have the chance to opt in and opt out of different pieces, depending on what's a good fit for our particular sites. So as depicted in this photo, multi-site evaluation uses the same lens to look at different things, different sites. Contrary to this photo, we know that there are no two festivals that are exactly the same. So our job as the PIs of this project is to coordinate the national effort, to coordinate that multi-site evaluation. There's a fair bit of research on multi-site evaluations and what makes them successful, and we plan to draw pretty heavily from those best practices. One of the things that makes them successful is to actually have the leadership team do a lot of the grunt work, so that the individual participating partner sites don't have to do that. And we certainly plan to implement that best practice. So our plan is to create the instruments that you might choose to use. We will field test those, we will validate those, and then make them available to you. You'll also have the chance to participate in the development process if you're interested in doing that. We're going to program everything into technology and provide you with the technology that you can use, and help you prepare to train field researchers if you need those folks, and then load everything into technological platforms or into our own EvalFest website that's going to really reduce, we hope and think, the analysis and reporting burden for each individual festival, so that a lot of that work will be done for you as part of this project. Those are sort of the broad brushstrokes of some of the benefits of the project and some of what we hope to provide for you. I'm going to turn it back over to Denise to talk a little bit more about specific expectations for the project.
All right, so of course there are expectations, and these work both ways. We're going to go into greater detail about expectations at the required webinar. That'll be the true kickoff for EvalFest that all of the festivals will be present at on November 10th. But we thought we would just touch on a few things right now. So EvalFest is expecting each festival to do the following things. One, actively participate in the EvalFest community. That means attending annual meetings, webinars, instrument development and providing feedback, and testing things, methodologies out as your festival is able to do so. We also expect that you will fully participate in 5 annual meetings. The first 2 annual meetings will be in person, and then the last 3 will be virtual meetings. And not only do we expect you to participate, we expect 2 people from your festival to participate. One, a festival organizer, or the festival director, whoever you choose, but the other, an evaluator. We'll talk more about that, of course, in a moment. We also expect each festival to do data collection and reporting, and that's going to start in 2015. And then the EvalFest project itself will be evaluated. So we've got an evaluator for a project about evaluation, and that our evaluator will have some needs to collect information from each festival site. That's primarily information that's going to help Catherine and Karen and I make sure we're doing the best we can to meet your needs. And I also just wanted to say here right now that as we've been kind of calling and introducing ourselves and touching base with each festival, we've gotten several questions about whether this grant has funding to support individual evaluation efforts for individual festivals, and the answer to that is no. So we don't have funds to help you hire an evaluator for your festival, but we do have funds to support your travel and instrument development and creation of a common place where we can put all the materials that come out of this project. Okay, like I said, expectations are a two-way street. So here's what you should expect from us as the EvalFest team. One is an active community that's interested in and supportive of the work of festival evaluation. We're going to work really hard to build a community and want you to expect to tap into that community, whether it's other festival organizers and evaluators. We've got kind of an amazing advisory group, so we really want you to expect to have this great community. We also will have evaluation tools, instruments, and other methodologies available for your use. We're going to provide technology to support evaluation efforts at your festival. That includes iPads and specific apps and web tools to enable you to collect data efficiently. You can expect from us funding to support your travel expenses to those first 2 annual meetings. You can also expect an opportunity to apply for funding to pilot test innovative evaluation methodologies. That won't happen in the first year or 2, but as we move forward, we're going to have opportunities for you to try new things that might help you understand your festival better. And then you also have access to a centralized database of festival evaluation data that runs across festivals. So this should be a really rich resource for us as we're thinking, as each of our festivals is thinking about how to improve our work. So expectations both ways, and we hope for 100% satisfaction guaranteed.
So Denise mentions that, one of the common questions that we've gotten as we started to talk to folks is about budget. Another common question is, do we really need an evaluator? Can I just, as a festival director, as a festival organizer, do this on my own? And we really think that it's best if you don't. So evaluation overall is a lot to chew on. If you think about the two lists that Denise just reviewed, there's a lot going on with EvalFest. It's going to be a lot to think about and process, and it's going to require a little bit of additional work during your festival. We want each festival director who attends the meeting in January to have a thought partner to start chewing on this stuff with. We plan to spend a lot of our time together in January in workshop mode and really thinking about what we want to learn from our attendees, what we want to learn from exhibitors and event hosts, and what information we can use to improve our festival. And we think that time is going to be best spent if you have somebody to think with and somebody who's going to continue to partner with you into the future. We also want somebody, we want each team to have somebody whose sole responsibility it is for collecting data during your festival. If you're on this call and you're a festival director or a lead coordinator, your plate is probably already overflowing during your festival, and we know that and recognize that. You're probably already doing more than most people would think is humanly possible just to make your festival go. And we don't want to add evaluation to that list of things to do. So we want to make sure that there is somebody on each festival's team that can be devoted to the festival evaluation as a top priority, even during the festival itself. And so we encourage you to find a friend. We think it's important, what's important to think about when it comes to finding somebody that you would want to partner with on this project is that it's somebody who you're going to enjoy thinking with. Evaluators, as some of you have probably already heard, are sometimes referred to as critical friends. And so when you're thinking about who to bring in for this role, we want you to choose somebody that could devote time and energy to the EvalFest community, but also somebody that you would enjoy working with as the evaluator for your festival. So that could be a member of your current festival team who's going to start taking a larger leadership role with evaluation from this point forward. It could be a colleague from your department or a volunteer that you know you can rely on. Any of those would be absolutely fine choices for somebody to fill this role. As Denise mentioned, it is our expectation that your evaluator will come to Chapel Hill with you in January to attend the annual meeting. And then that person would also take responsibility for the evaluation of your site. And so that could be everything from identifying field researchers to help collect data, training those people, getting the technology that the grant provides out in the field and making sure all of that's working, and maybe even doing some data collection on his or her own. Now, those different roles are going to vary from festival to festival depending on what your evaluation needs and interests are, but I do think that's sort of the full range of the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about when you're trying to identify somebody to fill this role.
Okay, this is Catherine again. Most likely one of the first decisions that you will need to make is whether you'll look for someone internally or look to find an external evaluator. And as you likely already know, this has budget implications, and budget may very well be the deciding factor for you and your science festival. In general, as you may likely guess, an external evaluator is going to be more expensive than having someone do it internally. But what we hope to do in the next few minutes of this webinar is go through some of the benefits of working internally and as well as drawbacks, and the same for working with external evaluators. And so our next slide here is just some possibilities for places that you can start thinking about evaluation, and Karen already mentioned a lot of these possibilities. So if you are to look internally, perhaps there's someone on your staff who wants to take on this role, or perhaps there's someone, either if you're at a university or you're in a city with the university, perhaps there's a graduate student or a very committed volunteer who wants to take on supporting your evaluation work. If you want to look towards finding an external evaluator, we have here several resources listed as places to start. We also would be happy to talk with you more about that offline. And then whatever method you end up going with, as I think you all are likely aware, that if your festival involves a big expo event, a carnival day, a discovery days, they have a lot of different names, but days where there's thousands and thousands of people attending an event, in addition to having an evaluator, you'll likely need a team for that day or days in order to hopefully collect lots of surveys. And that's an opportunity to reach out to additional graduate students or practicum students or volunteers. And I'll actually just take a minute here to provide a brief history of what the Bay Area Science Festival has done, which is in our first 2 years, we were part of a National Science Foundation award that included support for working with the Goodman Research Group. And so they came and they brought a team and they did all of the evaluation and analysis for us, and that was great. But it was pretty expensive. And so since that grant has ended, last year was the first year that we relied generally on volunteers, and honestly, there were mixed results there. We were able to do it on a shoestring budget. We did get a similar number of surveys back as we did with GRG, but it was a lot of time on our staff's part to recruit and train and support the volunteers. And as you might imagine, the commitment of the volunteers was mixed. And so we had people the day of who, after doing it for an hour or less, were like, oh, I'm going to leave now. Because getting people to complete surveys isn't always the most rewarding thing to be doing. So this year we're trying a new model, still relying heavily on volunteers, but also specifically having volunteer captains, and we're providing them with a small level of support and training them ahead of time, and really hoping, and they're committed people that we know, we've worked with in various ways. And so that we're going to have like about 5 of them, and each of them will oversee a small team of volunteers. And so we're trying different models and learning as we go. What we would like to do now is actually just do a quick poll and hear from each of you. If you had to say right now, what do you think? Are you going to work with someone internally, externally, or you're not sure yet? And so if you could choose, let's see, same place where you have like the raise your hand to ask a question, you have the option to choose A, B, or C. So please go ahead and do that. It's on the left-hand side, and just take a second. Okay, that's great. We've got 5 responses, so that's great. Thank you. So it looks like the majority of people are planning to go with an internal evaluator. So this next slide is in some ways sums up some of my experiences working with various evaluators over the years, and I certainly have come to it at times with this perspective of like, well, what am I getting out of it, or what is my group here at UCSF getting out of it? And really, what I want to get out of these things is I want to learn things, and as Karen said earlier, that can be the great role of an evaluator, that they can ideally can be a critical friend, can bring up perspectives that you weren't already thinking of. And I have to say that I've had mixed results in this case with external evaluators. And that given that most people are going to work internally, I think I'll keep that briefer. But what I have found in the past with a lot of our external evaluators, and we've worked with a number, we've worked with individual external evaluators, we've worked with groups of evaluators like Goodman Research Group and Rockman et al., which is one here in the Bay Area, and some others. And sometimes those have been very valuable relationships, and at other times I felt like we know our program much more intimately than they do, and they haven't been able to tell us much that we didn't already know. And so that at times has been frustrating. Now, working internally, what I find there is that you lack the external perspective, and maybe a source of ideas and new things to try. In this case, one would hope that this EvalFest community will be able to provide a lot of that and a lot of cool ideas, people sharing what they've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And then for me, the other challenge internally is probably an obvious one, which has been finding the time to actually really go through the data that's collected, think about it, what does it mean. That has often been a great benefit of working with someone externally, is that they actually really go through it, they write a report for us, they point out things, and when we've done things internally, it can be easy to let it get pushed aside, as you might imagine. So I think I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll hear Denise's perspective now.
All right. In reflecting on my experiences with evaluators, and I should preface this by saying my experiences that I've reflected on are broader than our experience with the North Carolina Science Festival. I have to be very careful here because our evaluator is sitting right next to me in the same room, Karen Peterman. So please know I'm thinking more broadly about other projects, other things that we do besides the festival at Moorhead Planetarium and Science Center. But upon reflection, to me, a major theme of working with an evaluator is to make sure that you merge your efforts with the evaluator and sort of become one. You know, the best situation is where you do have the time to find an evaluator who you really want to be in the same lane with you, and that you're definitely going in the same direction. I find that the most successful relationships with evaluators, whether it's internal or external, and I've had some experience with both, is making sure that philosophically you're aligned and on the same page with not just kind of a personal style, but really an approach and a methodology. When I was hiring my first evaluators, I didn't realize that they weren't all the same and they didn't all have the same toolbox and bag of tricks to help us get that data that, as Catherine said, would result in me learning something new. You know, maybe that was naive on my part, but as I've become more experienced with evaluators and evaluation, I've come to appreciate that some evaluators do their work in a very particular way. They have a specific philosophy, and we might even seek them out or hire them because of an expertise they have, or a particular audience segment they work with, or a particular tool that they use that they're expert at, and that's why you work with them or hire them. But others are other evaluators are more participatory in their approach, or more open to new ideas, or kind of listen to the problem first and then come up with the evaluation solution that's going to fit the needs of that particular problem or idea that you're trying to understand better. And how do you figure out who is the right person? I think it does take some time to look at their past work and maybe even talk with people who have worked with those individuals before. Kind of look to see if there's a pattern to the kind of evaluation data they collect, audience segment they work with, or kind of programs they work with. And even look at the output reports that they provide and see if they all kind of follow a particular format or model or use the same tools. And that's, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that, you kind of need to know as you're looking for an evaluator what you're getting into. Other ways to, the other main way that I have kind of figured out who I might like to work with on a particular project is just to take them to lunch and talk with them. I can remember the day that I had my first meeting with Karen Peterman, and it was at a coffee shop here in Chapel Hill, and just sat for a couple hours and thought, I really like her approach, her philosophy merges with that of Moorhead Planetarium Center and with me, and she can add a lot to the little bit that I know about the Science Festival, because I think we had one at that point. And she has an expertise I can tap into, but she doesn't claim to kind of have every answer and know all the solutions. She wants to be a partner with us. And for me, that was what I was looking for. So, so kind of in trying to find the right person, I kind of think of it as like a marriage. Where ideally you agree on all the big stuff, the philosophical stuff, and you get along, and sometimes you're even really excited to be around each other. Maybe not always, but you don't sweat. But for me, don't sweat the small stuff, and the philosophical part is really important because this person is someone that if you really bring them into your lane, bring them on your team, becomes another extension of the festival and can really just be another great mind helping you think through what you're offering during your festival and how you're doing it. I guess the other thing I would like to say, and then I'll move on, is in terms of being successful with the evaluator that you select, or evaluation firm that you select, is to bring your evaluator in as early as possible into the planning process. Again, kind of reflecting on my experiences and learning from my own mistakes. I thought evaluation was just something that happened at the end, and I could, kind of bring someone in right before I was about to implement my program, and they would just be able to tell me what happened and whether it was successful or not. And again, that's, naive, and 10, 15 years later, I know a little better. But we now have a practice of almost as we're coming up with our idea, hiring an evaluator, or bringing an evaluator in from somewhere, on our campus or in our community, just to, if nothing else, be a set of ears early on. The earlier the evaluator can be involved in understanding what it is we're trying to accomplish, the better he or she can help us figure out how to collect the data we need to know if we're achieving our goals. So now evaluators at Moorhead are invited into meetings. We include them on every email distribution list that we have, and they come to our board meetings and steering committee meetings whenever they can. And again, I would just like to say, once you are able to identify your evaluator, EvalFest is sort of forcing everyone's hand a little bit to make sure there's an evaluator in early in the process. But as early as possible is better. And if you find someone as an evaluator who has some experience doing the kinds of evaluation that I think is, critical or important for science festivals, working with informal science education, with general public, that they're going to have a lot of insights that are going to help you improve your program before you even really get started in the planning. So with that, I think I hand it back to Karen, and we'll get to hear from the evaluator's perspective.
Yeah, and I think what I want to say probably echoes a lot of what Catherine and Denise have already shared, but from the perspective of the evaluator. So I only do external evaluation, and so we'll be speaking from that perspective. And as an external evaluator, one of the things that I was a little surprised by when I first started doing this work is the fact that program people and evaluation people really think about things differently. And Denise and I joke about this all the time because my brain goes straight to a data place. As soon as she starts talking to me about a project, I start thinking about data. And what can we find out? What can we learn? What can we do? And sometimes she'll just look at me and be like, wow, my brain does not work that way. And I feel the same way. But there's this sort of beautiful complementary relationship that I think can be formed between somebody who does approach things from a data mindset and somebody who approaches things from a programmatic mindset. If you have the opportunity to really sit down and mix it up together and think about data and what data could mean for your festival. For me, I think it's really fun to think about how to collect information that can actually be used by a project team. So it's not just doing evaluation for the sake of evaluation's sake. It's not just doing it to drain the budget and leaving you in that, what's in it for me kind of a position. It's really thinking about, okay, let's gather some data we can use, and if it turns out that we collected data that we didn't use, then let's not collect it anymore. Let's move on to something else that we're going to actually be able to benefit from. I also find a great deal of satisfaction in being able to share results from an evaluation and to sit with a client and think together about what it means and what we can do about the data that we have. I do think that it's rare for project team leaders and evaluators to have devoted time to sit down together, and I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about with EvalFest is that we are going to carve that time out for all of us. And the reason I'm excited about that is that the strongest and I think closest relationships that I've gotten to have in my career thus far have been the result of those kinds of moments. They've usually been imposed on us. It's not something that I chose to do myself, but I think it is a great model to have folks sit down and put their heads together. So as I said, we're going to provide you that opportunity through EvalFest. That's a lot of what we're going to do in January. And so as you're thinking about somebody who might be able to fill this role for you, I would like to challenge you to think about whether you have somebody in your network who might have a slightly different perspective than you do, but a perspective that you enjoy, and somebody who, is maybe provocative in how they approach things and can push you a little bit or challenge you a little bit in how you think about what you really want to learn and what you really can learn from the instruments that are going to be made available and the technology that's going to be made available to you through this project. If you have somebody with a background in either education research or social science research, I think that person would be an ideal candidate to consider. I think the more savvy your evaluator is about data and working with data in the messy context that education systems and social science systems tend to be, the more you're going to be able to leverage what EvalFest has to offer. You go next slide. You do not need to look at any of these websites, but if you are really interested in thinking about evaluation, finding an evaluator, and want to learn a little bit more, these are 3 great resources you might want to check out. The Denver Evaluation Network, this is actually something very cool that we just learned about, and I think it's going to be a great model, particularly for the 5 or 6 of you who plan to have an internal evaluator. The Denver Evaluation Network was formed a couple of years ago by 15 informal learning institutions in the Denver area. They are all a program staff of 1, maybe 2 people, but wanted to do more with evaluation and wanted to take ownership of that. And so they came together to create a collaborative, very similar to what we're doing with EvalFest, except they're obviously more geographically convenient to one another. And they have had fantastic success. And so I just learned about this group about a week ago. I'm going to have the chance to see some results presented at AEA later this month about this network. And I think they're going to be a great model for us. They have a really inspiring video that we might end up watching when we're together in January, just as a way to get the juices flowing and to think about all of the very cool things that we could accomplish through this grant. If you want to think about or look into other more broad evaluation resources, if you just do a Google search on finding an external evaluator, you'll come up with a really long list of discipline-specific sites and their take on evaluation. And I think there is something potentially useful about those. The one that's the best fit for us is on the CASE website. The Find an Evaluator is one of the resources that we provided in an earlier slide. They also have an evaluation resources page, and that includes everything from a guide for how to manage external evaluations to different evaluation handbooks. So you can check those out if that feels of interest. The Grants Northwest option that's on this slide is sort of a generic one-stop shop. It reiterates a lot of the different topics that we've talked about today, but it'll take you through the entire process of thinking about whether you need an evaluator, if it's going to be somebody internal or external, how to interview that person, some of the philosophical standpoints that Denise mentioned earlier, and then how to manage that and think about reporting and analysis. So those are there if you want or need them. We are about to open up for questions, but before we do that, I wanted to mention that each of your festivals has been assigned to one of the 3 PIs. We wanted to make sure that you all had a point person that you knew you could contact if you had questions, if challenges come up, if you just need a little bit of additional clarification. If you haven't already had the chance to connect with your PI directly, then one of us should be emailing you or calling you soon. We're in the process of getting in touch with folks and setting those meetings up now, and so if you haven't seen an email come through yet, don't be surprised if you get one in your inbox shortly. In the meantime, we are going to open it up for questions. So if there's anything you'd like clarification about, if you have any particular ideas or experiences you'd like to share with the group about working with evaluators, potential pitfalls, I think that would also be great. We are going to ask that you raise your hand if you are interested in making a comment or if you have a question, and we will we will sort of open your mic at that point so that you can ask the question to the group. All right, if there aren't any questions, then let me ask, so 5 or 6 of you indicated that you are thinking of using somebody internal, and I'd love to hear if you already have somebody in mind for that and who that person might be, what their expertise is, and why you're thinking they might be a good fit. And this is really a selfish concern of my own. Or not a concern, but just something that I'm interested in knowing how people are thinking about it and how far along folks are in their thinking, or whether this is something that's really going to potentially feel like something stressful that needs to get taken care of in short order between now and when we are meeting again in November or in January. So just as a reminder, if you hit the little hand icon above that's in the participant list box,
all right. Jim, you're on the line.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Oh, great. All right, so we've got a comment from Larry in the chat box that he's an evaluator for Celebrate Science Indiana. Woo! And you know the organizer very well and you work well together. That's great. And you've been helping with the survey that you do. That's wonderful. Great, thank you. Oh, and Jim, your mic's not working. Can you chat in the, can you write your question or comment in the chat box? Oh, you have a grad student from Virginia Tech School of Education.
Awesome.
Okay.
We've used a couple of different models here to try to work with graduate students. I've actually been really interested in exploring that model myself and have contacted several different ed departments, and it's never worked out at the grad level. We did try to integrate the evaluation into a practicum class in 2012, and that was not as successful as we would have liked. So I'm not sure I would do it again with an undergraduate level class, but I am still really interested in working with graduate students, and that's mostly who I end up hiring for my field researcher teams. So I haven't had the chance to have one help me lead an evaluation yet, but have certainly had them play key roles as part of the field researcher team.
And this is Denise. I actually have hired graduate students for evaluations before at Moorhead, not for the Science Festival specifically. And they've done an incredible job. Both times they had a faculty supervisor, so someone who in their graduate program, and both of them were from the School of Education, sort of took them under their wing. In one case it was a qualitative evaluation professor, and another it was quantitative, and they got a lot of support from those faculty members, and we sort of all worked as a team, but it was very successful both times.
And in case you guys didn't see it come through in the chat, Jim is sort of agreeing that undergrads may not be the way to go. But it seems like they have a lot of experience working with grad students for the purposes of evaluation.
Great. Holly, oh, maybe you just, yay, great. I was going to say, we saw that you were doing something out there. Holly, if you want us to turn your mic on, in fact, we're going to turn your mic on in case you'd like to speak, but don't feel obligated. So a grad student. Oh, wait, I didn't turn your mic on. Let me do that better. All right. Holly, if you're there and you want to speak, feel free to do it. We turned your mic on. But we're also looking at your comment that you plan to bring on a grad student who will work under the supervision of a faculty member, head of science, education, evaluation, and assessment. That's exactly the situation I've had in the past, and it's been quite successful. Okay, are there any other questions? You can either type them in the chat box or raise your hand with the hand icon. Okay, if not, we're going to kind of keep looking. It seems like there's sort of a delay sometimes. If not, we wanted to just remind you, this information was on an email that went out a few weeks ago, and you'll be getting more communication from us moving forward now that we're in full swing. But there are 2 upcoming required meetings. The November 10th webinar is our EvalFest orientation webinar. All 26 festivals involved in EvalFest will be online for that webinar. We're going to go more fully into expectations, into kind of the timeline and kind of what we see happening in each of the 5 years of the project. Again, answer any questions you have. And then we'll get down to some of the nitty-gritty regarding the next required meeting, which is actually a face-to-face meeting, January 14th and 15th. We'll be in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, January 14th and 15th. We've already ordered fair weather across the country for everyone who will need to come in to North Carolina, so you will have no travel problems whatsoever. But we will meet for 2 full days. We'll start addressing some of the options, or some of the opportunities, and discussing some of the logistics around collecting data the first year and looking at tools. Great. Okay, and we do see a question here. What are the options if our team cannot attend mandatory meetings? So we'll probably talk with you offline about that and see what we can work out, because I think it's really important from the beginning to have participation. We do have a mechanism with EvalFest for festivals to come into the project, I believe, the 3rd year. So if it's, just timing doesn't work out for this first year, we can talk with you about that. But hopefully we can work something out so Cambridge can be involved from the very beginning. But we'll get in touch with you about that specifically. All right, we don't see any other questions or hands raised. Oh, is there a time for November 10th? Yes, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Mary, thanks for that question. Travel expenses. Yes, hey Jim. We will be covering all of the travel expenses for 2 individuals from each festival to attend the face-to-face annual meetings, including this one coming up in January. The way that will work is that we'll provide a stipend for each person who attends, festival organizer and an evaluator. It'll be on the, we've got to work out the final details, but it'll be on the order of about $1,500 per person, which we expect to cover travel expenses, whether that's airfare, and I believe most people would be flying in, or car rental and such, and hotel and all of your expenses. We'll work out the final amounts, but it's looking like about $1,500 would cover the majority of people, and we'll work with you on that. Substantiated by receipts as before and reimbursed. So I believe we're going to handle this differently. We're still working it out with our university. I believe you're going to make your own travel plans. We've got a block of rooms reserved at an area hotel. You'll make your own travel plans and pay, and we'll fill out the forms during the annual meeting for you to get reimbursed and submit those to the university. And yes, the reimbursement will be after the annual meeting. Good questions. All right. Unless we see any hands raised or questions pop up in the next few seconds, I think we're going to sign off for today. We appreciate you coming to this webinar. We very much appreciate your involvement and interest in EvalFest. As Karen mentioned, Catherine or Karen or I will be calling you to check in if we haven't done so already, so you should expect to hear from us soon. And if we don't talk with you before then, we'll see you again on we'll hear you again on November 10th. And thanks a bunch.
Thanks, everybody.